What's up, guys? It's Boxing Disciple coming at you with a video reply to Blood in 78. They made a video about a week ago stating, was Floyd Mayweather Jr. top 10 of all time? Blood said no, 78 said yes. I just wanted to make a video clarifying my opinion. I think in order to change somebody's mind or in order to really cause a difference, it takes more than one person to say something. So as much as I've seen comments on their page, on Blood's page, saying how Floyd's top, 10 and you're crazy, I wanted to make a video about it too, not just comment. I also have seen some other videos. Another good one, Devil's Boxing, he's got a good video out about it. I just want to clarify that I respect both 78 and Blood Boxing. I think they're both some of the best YTBC channels out there, and I just love the YTBC community. I think everybody's doing the right thing out there. Everyone has great videos. I just wanted to make a reply video to what Blood said. He starts off by saying the resume. Floyd Mayweather Jr. is not top because of the resume. The resume is not there. I kind of want to attack the resume. As much as, boxers put everything behind the jab, he put every argument behind the resume, and I just kind of want to attack that and say that you can't really say if a boxer is the best ever or the fifth best or top whatever because of a resume. That's a piece of paper, and at the end of the day, we do not go by a piece of paper to tell us who's the best ever. When you talk to somebody and they actually saw this guy fight and they were at his fights and they followed his career, that's a difference than us going on Google or going wherever we go online, the books, and we get a piece of paper that tells us what somebody did and we go, oh, he's the best, look at this piece of paper. Just like boxing matches aren't fought on paper, you can't really take a piece of paper, and I disagree with resumes saying who's the best. That to me is not a good opinion. Why it's not a good opinion is because the resume doesn't give you, what era they fought in. A resume doesn't give you who they fought. A resume doesn't say, out of the 100 guys, how many of these guys are champions? How many of them were southpaws? How many of them were younger, faster? A resume won't say that. A resume is just going to say who you beat, or it's going to say your record, and then, that's it. It's going to say how, maybe you had some tough fights, but I really don't think the resume is a reason to pick a fighter at all. That doesn't make any sense at all. It's who you fought. It's how you fought them. It's what you brought to the table. It's what you did that made you the best. Just like Michael Jordan, when you talk about basketball, Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time. Why is he the greatest basketball player of all time? If I had to ask you why, what would you say? You would say because of things he did on the court. Okay, and he's the greatest basketball player without a doubt. Did he play in the greatest era? I would say no. I don't think he played in the greatest era. Did he have the most game sevens? No. Did he have that great rivalry? He had a teams he played, but he didn't really have this great rivalry that Blood wants Floyd to have with a competitor. Okay, just because Michael Jordan didn't, lose a bunch of finals before he won one, or, that doesn't take away from what he did to the game. He's by far the greatest basketball player of all time. It doesn't matter what era he played in. It doesn't matter who he played against. And that's the same thing with Floyd Mayweather Jr. It shouldn't matter who this guy fights. It shouldn't matter that, he went, all 12 gruesome rounds with a competitor and that he lost the second fight and, some great trilogy with somebody. That shouldn't matter. What he does in the ring, how he beats somebody, his ring generalship, his ring IQ is just outstanding. His ability to adjust to everything thrown at him, to every punch, to everything. He's a computer out there. The way he diagnoses, all these people, all these different fighters. A resume can't tell you that. A resume can't tell you how great Floyd Mayweather Jr. is. Another thing is that, I'm not, I don't want to just say, oh, all these old fighters, we get better as time progresses. People get better, fighters get better. It's just how it is. I completely understand that. You're going to have a higher percentage of better fighters today than you were in the 50s. It's just common nature. It's what has happened in the world. In the 40s and the 50s, all these great fighters, they had 9 to 5 jobs. And then they would come home and they would box, or they got it in when they could. That's why they would fight so many times. That's why you see some of those guys having over 100 fights, because it was more, dare I say, a hobby. I mean, these guys had daytime jobs, and then they boxed on the side, whatever it may be for. They loved it, and it paid the money. They did it. So what I'm trying to say there is that today's fighters, boxers are boxers. They're fighters. They're out there for a reason, okay? They're not, working 9 to 5s and they do this on the side and they're doing that on the side. They've given up a career elsewhere. They've given everything else up. Some of them, have given up tremendous opportunities to give it all, their whole life, to boxing. 24/7, they're giving their whole life to boxing. They got trainers, nutritionists, everything you can think of. They have. To be the best out there, that's what you gotta have. And they're doing that today. And the fighters back in the day didn't. They had, their 9 to 5s and they boxed when they could. That's why you have guys with these inflated records, which, let's be honest, how many of those guys were real hard-earned wins? Sugar Ray Robinson, the greatest of all time. Definitely agree with that. I'm not second-guessing that. But he fought guys. He fought great fighters, but he had great fights with these guys. I'm not going to lie, But at the same time, how many of these fighters that he had were cutting meat from 9 to 5? I mean, how many of these guys were out picking up trash the night before and they're just there to make some cash? That will never, ever happen in today's era. Trust me, guys, you're never going to see, Floyd Mayweather Jr., you're never going to see Bernard Hopkins, you're never going to see Manny Pacquiao, these guys box somebody you never heard of who you saw working at Jewel this morning. You're not going to see that. But back then you did. You did see these guys who, were selling you oranges in the corner 2 days before, and they're boxing. Like, really? Everybody was a boxer back then. It was just a different set of standards that the world lives on today. All right, so as much as, to compare to something, look at movies. I'm not saying that Jaws is a classic movie, one of the greatest movies ever, will always be. Okay? So, but I'm also saying that not every movie made in the 60s or 70s, a lot of those movies were horrible. They were just made to get made to get money. And that's how boxers were back then. Horrible. They were just out there to make money. Now, you had a couple of the classic great boxers that we still have today in our top 10. Henry Armstrong, Sugar Ray Robinson, Sugar Ray Leonard. I mean, Muhammad Ali. You have tons of guys back then who are still in the top 10, who will always be. And they always should be. But one thing that Blood is saying, I think, that causes me just to kind of also question him is why he said a statement in this video that caught me. Out of this 45-minute video, this one thing he said caught me. He said that a few years ago, he had the same thing, how Floyd was in the top 20 because of his resume. what I started thinking was, okay, so you will never put Floyd in your top 20. It doesn't matter what he can do. It doesn't matter who he fights. You will never have Floyd Mayweather Jr. in your top 20. So I'm started thinking about that. And I'm like, so is he just, and then he's telling me his top 10, they're all old school fighters. So he doesn't have anybody now. So I'm thinking, okay, if he thinks the eras back then were better, and if he thinks the fighters back then were these great machines, is he saying that boxing's done and there'll never be another great boxer as long as we live that will be in your top 20 because you've already cemented those legends? That sounds kind of like you're not opening yourself up to seeing another fighter out there. Just because the era isn't amazing doesn't mean the boxer's not amazing. That's what you have to think of. That's what you have to see. You cannot go, oh, it ends at a certain point. Oh, boxing was great, but it's not anymore. So none of these fighters are going to make my top 20, because that's pretty much what that statement meant to me. It meant I'm not going to put Floyd in no matter what he does. So everything else that he argued made no sense to me, because it's like, you're not putting Floyd in no matter what he does. And then you say he cherry picks opponents. He's fought everybody put in front of him. He's fought everybody asked of him. He's fought guys where, he was underdog, where a lot of guys were like, oh, that guy's going to kill Floyd Mayweather Jr. And still to this day, people say that. People were saying that about Canelo. I think the resume is something that is blown out of proportion, and we should really look at that when we're judging fighters. I think it's something to throw out the window, guys. Look at what's being done in the ring. Alright, I'm going to come back part 2 of this video. I'm going to break down what Floyd does in the ring that these other, 19 guys or 20 guys that Blood has couldn't do in the ring. And I just want you to think of and understand that the resume is just an overblown thing, guys. Seriously. Just because you're better on paper doesn't mean you're better in the ring. And I guarantee you that Floyd Mayweather Jr. in his prime could have beaten a lot of these guys Blood has ahead of him. A lot of these guys. Okay? And I'm going to come at you with part 2, guys, real soon. I just wanted to say something real quickly, get it out there. Thanks a lot for listening.